We're going to talk about CPA affiliate marketing opportunities in Europe, and it's really a pleasure to have you all here. By way of a brief introduction, my name is Dush Ramachandran. I'm Vice President of Sales and Business Development for ClickBank. We operate worldwide. We have affiliates and vendors in over 200 countries. We have sales from over 200 countries in the world. We accept 13 currencies in addition to the US dollar, and we operate right across the world. So we have a distinguished panel assembled here. And before I turn to my fellow panelists for introductions, very briefly, just to set the tone of the discussion. How many of you in the audience are affiliates, by show of hands? Okay, that's great. How many are networks? Okay, and vendors? Great. Well, thank you. Welcome. How many of you, whether you're vendors or networks or affiliates, currently operate in Europe? Great. And how many of you are planning or considering entering Europe? Okay, welcome. Well, I hope the session will be informative and instructive to you. We're going to try and keep this session as interactive as possible. We're going to have lots of open discussions, so feel free to ask questions as we go along. There's a mic, and it's a large room, so if you feel like getting to the mic's a bit of a hassle, we've set up a little hashtag just for this event, and it's hash AFF Euro, that is AFFEURO, and if you can just ask your question through that, we can get those addressed as well. So let me turn to my fellow panelists and have them introduce themselves. James, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hello everyone, I'm James Little. I am the Head of Client Services at Affiliate Future, which is a global affiliate network primarily operating in London with offices in New York and Madrid as well. I've been in the affiliate industry for coming up for 7 years now. Been pretty much every side of the industry, so I've been an affiliate, a merchant, an agency and a network, so covered all of those off in a full circle. So hoping to help you today in terms of getting some advice and looking at what opportunities there are in the European market.
Great. Thanks, James. Matthew?
Thank you. Excuse me, before I go my throat there. My name is Matthew Wood. I'm founder of affiliatesforyou.com in the UK. That's an affiliate marketing forum. I guess you can compare it to something like a Best Web. Also founder of A4U Expo. That's an affiliate marketing conference and exhibition that started in 2007. We have shows in London. We had a show in the Netherlands last year. This year we'll be heading to Germany and of course London again. My background is that I've been an affiliate probably for over 12 years, literally since out of university. So I've gone full spectrum from being a one-man band, bedroom style affiliate to growing that into a limited company business with a team of developers and marketing experts. In terms of the verticals that I've been involved in the past, range from paid search to SEO. We've had cashback sites or rebate sites, voucher code and coupon sites. I'm also strongly developing data feed properties as well.
Very good. And Jim, would you care to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I understand there's a bit of a problem with the audio, and like some of the panelists probably up here are maybe sounding like they're from Britain. Is it happening again? No, sorry, I'm Jim Banks. Up until recently, I was the founder of Global Direct Media, which is an affiliate network based in the UK. I was also the founder of Primary Ads in the UK. Some of you guys may have heard of and worked with Primary Ads, who are now called Inuvo. I think they went through Cowabunga to Inuvo. But I was the founder of Primary Ads in the UK. I've been involved in online since '99, so this is my third decade in online, as you can probably tell from the grey hair and everything. But yeah, I mean, we've obviously run networks. We've been an affiliate ourselves. We've worked with clients who were affiliates. We've had some of our own sort of programs in the advertising space. We've done quite a lot of extensive campaigns in all countries all across Europe and pretty much around the world. And obviously, this panel, I guess, the fact that you guys are all here, we're just keen to kind of get on with it.
Excellent, great. So each of our panelists has a short presentation of a few slides. So we'll have them go through the presentations, and then we'll start to get into the interactive session. Again, as I said, as we go through the discussion, if there's something that comes up in your mind, please feel free to either ask a question or send in a tweet, and we'll get to it immediately. So James, would you like to go first? Jim? Okay, go ahead. We reverse the order.
I'm going to start off. I know that obviously it's probably been a long day, your feet are tired. I'm sure that most of you were in here just to kind of like rest your feet. But you'll be pleased to know that Beer O'Clock is coming very, very soon. But before we start that, I thought what I'd maybe do is just do a little bit of a quiz. How big do you think Europe is? How many people do you think live in Europe? Do you want to shout out some answers? 400 million? Any advances on 400 million? 400 million? Right. You'd probably be very surprised to know that the population of Europe, based on a census that was done in September 2009, 804 million people. Now, obviously, that's if you kind of equate that to the size of the population in the States, I mean, that's what, about 2.5 times as many people that live in Europe versus live in America. So people keep going on about the vast size of the US market and US opportunity, but when you actually kind of look at Europe as a complete entity, it's 2.5 times the size of Europe. America. In terms of like internet penetration, I mean, what you tend to find is that you know, in European countries there is a degree of difference from very, very high. And in Scandinavia, and I think pretty much in every country in Scandinavia, the internet penetration rate's in the high 90s, 90%. But you know, as a general kind of like consensus across the board, the internet penetration rate is around about 53, 54%. So that puts the internet users online currently at around about 412 million people, 418 million. And in terms of the countries that make up Europe, there are 53 countries in Europe. You guys didn't realize you were in for a geography lesson, did you? 53 countries in Europe, but 27 of those countries actually make up something which is called the European Union. And the European Union is kind of like, it's a little bit like a membership club. You know, all the people in Europe participate in this membership club where they all kind of share information, they ship stuff from one place to another. So they have like trading agreements with all the different countries to enable them to kind of like interact with each other. So there's 27 countries in the European Union. And in terms of the Big Ten in Europe, they actually kind of account for about 80% of the European population. So again, my maths is probably not that good, but that's about 64 million people in Europe are made up by the top 10 countries. So this is a slide that we'll make available kind of like after the event, but this is kind of like Europe by the numbers, and I'll try. I don't know if you can see that. I'm struggling to see it, but that's probably because I'm part blind. But the big 10 really are France, Germany, Italy, Spain, the UK, Russia should be on there, but it's obviously not. This is just the European Union side of things. But you know, in terms of like the number of people and the people using it. Like I said, obviously the scope for doing business in the affiliate space in Europe is clearly going to be governed by the number of people that live in that country and the degree to which they've kind of like they use the internet. So what are some of the challenges that face you guys in the CPA space? I mean, I think one of the big differences of CPA and affiliate marketing in Europe and versus CPA marketing in say, the States, is that traditionally what tends to happen is that the big advertisers' budgets are actually controlled through an ad agency. So typically what you have, if you're a network trying to sell this proposition in, you actually have somebody that's maybe a junior media planning or buyer who's actually the person that will be trying to negotiate your contracts for you. And that's a very, very different model than the model that's employed in the States. And I think generally speaking, certainly in the UK, most media planners don't really understand what CPA marketing is. And I think the other thing is that big network players don't often run CPA campaigns. It's typically the more traditional sort of affiliate model that everyone's used to. So I'm just going to kind of give you some of the mistakes that I think people are making. One of the things that we see people make the biggest mistake with is they think that in order to kind of like take a successful campaign and program, what they need to do is to just change the language, right? So they think, right, I'm going to change the language, maybe change the currency, so it'll be pound sterling in the UK or euros if it's one of the European countries. You know, maybe if it's like a campaign in France, stick a guy in a beret with onions around his neck and a white stripy shirt. That might be localization. But I think, you know, really you've got to look at it. Each country in Europe has a completely different culture, political nuances in the way in which they actually conduct their business online. And obviously all of the countries in Europe, they use the internet differently. Yeah, I mean, like in the UK, typically in, say, real estate, what you tend to find is that most British people are quite comfortable to have mortgages, whereas in some countries like France, like virtually nobody owns property in France. They all rent. One of the things that I was like astounded by is that, you know, in countries like Germany, I mean, everyone here is probably so used to using Facebook, but in Germany, Facebook is not the biggest social network. You'd be surprised to hear that. But there is actually something called, I don't even know how to pronounce it, StudiVZ, who is actually the German 800-pound gorilla in the social media space. In other countries across Europe, like in the Netherlands, you have a company called Netlog, and they have 60 million users on their panel. And both of these actually have advertising opportunities. So if you're a Facebook advertiser now, you know, and you're doing campaigns in Germany, Italy, Holland, and whatnot, you probably find that there's some great advertising opportunities that you may not even know exist. And that's all I wanted to kind of cover off. Matt and James are going to cover off some stuff, and then we'll throw it open for Q&A.
Thank you, Jim. Just remember a reminder of that hashtag. It's AFF Euro. But also refresh on the Twitter account. I won't go through this slide again because I've already covered it. But what I wanted to kind of cover is to look at some trends that we're seeing in the UK and some of the European marketplaces. The first thing that we've noticed over the last 12 months, certainly, is the emergence of sort of mega publishers operating across multiple territories and multiple countries within Europe. Of course, it all started off with paid search activity. It's very simple to replicate that activity if you've also built the infrastructure and the technology to analyze it and profit from it. But this has been transpired across into other verticals such as, let's say, voucher codes or coupon sites. So we've got a classic example here of a UK publisher, vouchercodes.co.uk, owned by a company called eConversions. Entered the marketplace in the UK for that particular site probably only about 12 months ago, but had become a top 3 player within that particular industry. Very recently, they launched Gutscheine codes in Germany. I think that's the pronunciation. As you can see, very simple site, very simple logo change, and it's very, very possible to do that. So, as Jim said, though, you have to consider the other factors. And the other change that we've seen over the last 12 months is the efforts that the multinational affiliate networks have made to make it easier for publishers to operate across other countries, and all through one control panel. So we've got the big players in Europe, network-wise, are players like Xanox, WebGains, Affiliate, and Trade Doubler, and there's also others like, Affiliate Future as well. And what they can offer affiliates is the access to local knowledge, which is really, really important. You have to get those sort of varieties and those nuances correct if you want to succeed in the marketplace. As you'll be able to tell from the slide earlier that Jim had about the growth in internet usage in Europe, there's been a massive growth over the last 12 months in Eastern Europe. What we're also seeing is concrete best practice guidelines being developed. We've got the Performance Marketing Alliance over here in the US, but there's also been a lot of work going on with the IAB Affiliate Council in the UK. They've been working on voucher code guidelines. If you're looking to enter the space in the UK, there's certain rules and regulations that you have to follow if you want to be accepted and continue to operate with some vendors or advertisers. They're also having a big quest for transparency. This is on both sides. So if you're a publisher, obviously advertisers want to know roughly where you're getting your traffic from, what activity you're doing, how you can work together. But on the advertiser side, they need to be transparent with us and factor in things like deduplication policies, what they're doing with those, because they all have an end result with the amount of commission and the ROI from your activity. Also, internal channel management. So what I mean by this is, for example, whether it's a voucher code site or a rebate site, a pure content site, blogging, etc. Now, there's been a lot of work going on by agencies looking at the true value of the customers that have been coming from different sources or different channels internally within affiliate marketing. And these things we've seen certainly over the last 3 months, for example, tiered commission structures for those channels. So you need to factor that in if you're entering the space. Advertisers are also working with fewer, higher volume affiliates, going back to trust and transparency. If they have a good working relationship with them and they're building a lot of traffic, then sometimes they will only work with 5 or 6 affiliates. And I find that quite astonishing. But we tried to apply for a program and said, nope, sorry, we're only working with 5 for the next 6 months. So that could be a barrier to entry. So, is it an easy ride? Possibly, but you have to do it right. And these are just some simple things I put down. Seek guidance from the EU affiliate networks. They've got a lot of knowledge, they've got a lot of time, and a lot of good understanding of the local marketplace. Remember that vertical popularity does vary massively by country. So by vertical popularity, I mean, for example, travel or gambling or gaming or retail. For example, I think cashback is very, very difficult in France because you have to almost register as a bank to do it. There is an AFU Expo presentation that's available. If you Google the Insider's Guide to Affiliate Marketing in Europe, you'll see a good breakdown of all those verticals and the level of activity across the top 5 countries in Europe. Other small tips, of course, is investing in local PR. This is going into sort of SEO strategy, which I'm not going to cover right now. And obeying best practice guidelines. I'm going to pass you over to James Little now. Do you want me to pass this slide on? Thank you.
Hey everyone. First of all, thank you to Jim for the informative bit about the European Union. You'd think that living in London I might know what the EU is, but I've had to come all the way to Vegas to learn that. So you do learn something new every day. As I mentioned previously, I work at Affiliate Future. I'm also an affiliate blogger, so please take down a note of my URL, although I don't seem to update it for months on end, so whether you get anything from that is another thing. I'm not going to go over too much here. I just wanted to kind of cover off a couple of quick bits of information that I found around about half an hour ago before coming to this presentation, because I thought maybe I should put a slide or two in there. Just kind of using the graph on the right there is from some Forrester research that they did in 2009. It just shows some different averages of if people who have made a purchase online and over the internet. So as you can see in Europe, the overall total is 93% of internet users that were surveyed have made a purchase online, and in North America it's 92%, but the global average is 86%. So, really kind of, is up there across the board. There's also, and these slides will be available online, so you probably can't see that graph very well there, and I can't either. But the top countries in terms of the percentage of individuals that have made a purchase online are Denmark, the UK, Netherlands, and it kind of goes down from there. The other thing I wanted to do is, obviously, we're an affiliate network and we're global, so we have offices in London, the USA, and Madrid. And kind of looking at the UK breakdown of publishers versus the European publishers is something I'm always quite interested in. So just a couple of other graphs here, just showing with Affiliate Future over the past kind of 12 months where our revenue's been coming from over those top 25 publishers. So, you know, things you'll see are quite big with us. Incentive is obviously quite big and is something that, you know, it needs to be controlled, which hopefully most of you, you know, understand, but can talk about later. Aggregator sites, whether it's travel aggregators, mobile aggregators, and data feed style sites are also kind of very prominent in the UK. Voucher codes are up there, but perhaps not as key as some people might have thought. And then you've got kind of email and search in the mix as well. Now, when you compare that to Europe, one of the things that I'm always astonished about is the amount of email activity that we have coming out of our European office. Now, I think that, to be honest, a lot of that is down to the fact that CPA is often defined differently. Lots of people see CPA as lead-based programs, and we tend to see it as acquisition or action programs, which means that sale-based ones are included. But one of the things we found since we entered Europe about 3 or 4 years ago is that in the territories which we specialise in, such as Spain, France and Germany, it's actually the CPL programs are a lot easier to come by than in the UK. I mean, we love CPL programs in the UK, they make us a lot of money, but they're actually easier at the moment to find in other territories, and hence the large amount of email that goes on, whereas not as many kind of aggregators and incentive sites. So what does that mean? One thing I'd say is just kind of treat each territory very differently. I mean, it's always, we've already said this already, but you know, if you look at somewhere like Spain, as I mentioned, it's very kind of CPL and email led, whereas the UK is quite different to that and is very kind of cost per sale and retail led in terms of the offers that are out there and easy to get hold of. The other thing I'd say is it's probably worthwhile kind of checking the terms and conditions of each of the networks that you're going to work with in Europe, because it does vary territory to territory. I mean, in the UK, you know, spyware, pop-ups and pop-unders were banned by all the networks a number of years ago, whereas if you go into other areas of Europe, you'll find that these are still very prominent and a main kind of form of income for lots of the networks. So, you know, something that you can do in one territory, you can't do as another. So, you know, make sure before you spend too much money, you're going to be allowed to do that as well. And I think, you know, just in terms of our stats, I mean, the European market and the affiliate landscape is just growing year on year hugely. I mean, our European network was over 100% up year on year in 2009 compared to 2008. And in the UK, we were around about 40% up. So, you know, a lot of that is because there's a variety of different offers. You know, the recession has had an impact, but, you know, it continues to grow, and that's why I think there's massive opportunities for anyone that wants to enter those territories. So that brings my slides to an end.
Very good. Thanks, James. All right, so let's, with that, I think you've got some nice ideas from these gentlemen, from our panelists. So it's probably a good time to take this session into the interactive portion. So maybe we can start with Jim. Jim, what specific opportunities do you think exist for affiliates that are primarily based in the United States that want to break into Europe? What would you suggest to them?
Well, I think, I mean, one of the things that I think is very underutilized by European-based affiliates is email marketing. I think, you know, obviously in America, everyone's been absolutely hammered to death with canned spam compliance. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's been very, very difficult to kind of like, you know, to stay on top of that. And I guess consequently, a lot of people that I know that have been doing email and done very well with it have kind of like switched away and they're doing other things because they're just finding it's so much more difficult to keep it going. Whereas I think if you look at Europe, because of this complexity of the European Union, stuff like that, what you have is that each country has its own email guidelines. They are just guidelines. Then there's nothing kind of like in the statute books or anything like that. you know, the EU commissioners kind of meet, and these are all like 95-year-old grey-haired people that probably don't even know what the internet is,
right.
but they're trying to come up with policy. So I think, you know, if you look at if you read the documentation around, you know, the whole, what you can do in terms of email marketing, most of the documentation relates to, you know, rules and regulations from like 7, 8 years ago, when really email wasn't used as heavily as it is now. So, you know, if you're a spammer, definitely email is good to, you know, you can make good money. There's some good programs you can make money. And certainly in Europe, most people are much more tolerant of spam. And I don't mean that in a, you know, tongue in cheek. It's genuinely, we're far less likely to complain about receiving it. You know, we'll just go, okay, that's not for me, delete, rather than, you know, what are you doing?
Get upset and
that
complain.
Stuff? Yeah.
Right. That's interesting.
So I think email is certainly sort of one area.
Great. Matthew, any insights on that?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I think affiliate marketing, in my view, is all about the execution and the smart execution of what you're doing. So if you take any particular niche and you research the market that you're going into, have a look at your competitors, and if you can do that better, you know, make it a lot better and smartly executed, then I think you can succeed. And I think the slide that I showed earlier on about the voucher codes website there, you know, that didn't exist 12 months ago, and it now has over 1 million members in the UK. That's, you know, 62 million population. That's a massive email list, which I'm sure they're monetizing. So take your niche that you're familiar with, perhaps in this market, and transfer that to another market. So the UK would be an easier stop, and then perhaps into mainland Europe also.
Right. James, do you have a spin on that that's related to your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I'd firstly say if you are a spammer, please don't sign up with Affiliate Future, because we definitely don't encourage that. I mean, I guess that one of the things that we've seen a lot of the trends in the US have, you know, started to follow into the UK. I mean, there is very much cultural differences. I mean, if you look at coupon sites in the US compared to the voucher code sites in the UK, the type of way they're being used is very different. You know, we don't really get many printable coupons, but they are coming slightly more prominent over the past kind of 12 months or so. But I think there's definitely massive opportunities within the European space. You know, first of all, just, you know, look if you're getting any European traffic already, and, you know, there's a bunch of new technology platforms that, you know, if you're just linking directly and not working with any affiliate programs, you just need to put a snippet of JavaScript on, which may well help you, you know, get more revenue straight away without even needing to do much work, which is obviously going to be nice for you guys. You know, looking at, you know, there's still massive opportunities, I think, with using social networks, which I don't think are really being done too much in the UK at the moment. And we're seeing a lot more kind of prominence of the free trial style sites seem to be kind of coming into certainly the UK and the European marketplace, much to many's annoyance, but, you know, there's some definite kind of opportunities there as well. So, I mean, I think I'd just say that, you know, there's masses that you can do.
Great.
Can I just add? I mean,
Sure.
one other thing that you notice. I mean, obviously, you know, if you're involved in the kind of continuity space, I mean, in the last couple of weeks, Visa, MasterCard have got very kind of like clamping down big time on that type of stuff. And certainly, you know, I think what you're finding is people that are processing merchant-wise in Europe are kind of like, I'm sure that Visa and MasterCard will get to it eventually, but at the moment they're focusing on the North American market. Right. So some of the programs that are doing very well are the localized versions of the diet, weight loss, teeth whitening, acai berry, that type of stuff. That is now doing very well, because believe it or not, we do actually have fat people in Europe, and people and Europeans are renowned for not having nice teeth. So,
right, okay. So you made an interesting point. Did you have a question?
No, I was just.
Oh, okay. I didn't want to ignore you. No, I didn't want to. Yes, sure.
From Eastern Europe, and I would like to ask how many affiliates and merchants you have from Eastern Europe, for example, or what's the percentage between Western and Eastern Europe?
Okay, that's a good question. Let me repeat the question for people in the back that might not have heard the question. The question was, what is the percentage split of affiliates between Eastern and Western Europe, the former Soviet bloc countries versus Western Europe? Any answers to that, gentlemen?
I think in terms of like the balance between affiliates and advertisers, there are a lot of affiliates from Eastern Europe, a lot. you know, and a lot of them are very, very sophisticated, very successful, and have been for some time. I think what you're finding is that you know, like I said, as Matt pointed out, you know, some of the Eastern European countries have now got into the EU, so then they now have a market open to them that didn't have before. So I think what you'll find is that eventually the sort of spillover of the advertising propositions will actually find their way to those countries. And when they do, I think, you know, clearly the fact that the internet penetration rate is increasing so rapidly, you know, that can only lead to kind of good things. So I think it's one of those, there probably are, certainly I know in places like Holland, they've got, you know, sort of specialist networks, France specialist networks. I think it may take a kind of big powerhouse network to go into some of those countries, invest some money. I think, you know, that might be a way of doing it. But again, they need a local proposition to kind of capitalize on the local market.
Yeah, and that I would actually agree with what Jim just said. Within ClickBank, we see we have affiliates all over the world, and we certainly see a lot of affiliates being very successful in the former Eastern Bloc countries like Poland and the Czech Republic and so on. And another very interesting area that's developing is Ukraine, not so much Russia, but Ukraine certainly seems to show a lot of promise. So there is a certain amount of business and interest from affiliates in Eastern European countries. You had another follow-up question?
It's more technical. I heard a few weeks ago that, for example, Germany had problems with tracking by Google Analytics. Don't you think that tracking of affiliate networks will not have similar regulations? Or?
Well, the question was, is tracking of affiliate referrals going to be more difficult and more problematic in Eastern Europe?
No, it was specific for Germany.
For Germany?
Yeah.
Okay. Specifically, is there any problem with affiliate tracking in Germany? Well, speaking for ClickBank, and I'll throw it open to my co-panelists here in just a second, we have, as I said, we generate quite a lot of revenue from Germany, and we have absolutely no tracking problems that we recognize, that we know of. We have exactly the same type of tracking success in Germany or anywhere in Europe versus what we have in the US. Any of you gentlemen have a different experience?
Sorry.
I wasn't aware that there was a problem in Germany.
Yeah.
I wasn't particularly aware.
It was
I'm
not,
sorry.
but it could be. There was speaking with, about problem with Google Analytics. Google Analytics has too much information about German browsers, and government of Germany, it's not yet in law, but they started speaking about it.
It's not something we're familiar with.
I have the answer for that.
Okay.
Please.
There's a EU regulation that has to be implemented in each country that will block third-party cookies. And did you hear about that?
I have heard, yeah.
Yeah. What's your point of view of that?
Again,
we hate it, but
I think if you look at it, because it's the internet and it's supposed to be this whole freedom of information and speech and so on and so on, you know, I think to try to regulate what goes on across kind of borders is going to be probably unenforceable, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the EU regulation was a joke, to be honest. I mean, the last I heard is I think that's been overturned now, but perhaps I'm incorrect in that. But, I mean, it would never happen. You know, you couldn't ban cookies and you couldn't stop it from happening because just to regulate it would be impossible at the moment.
Right.
So it's certainly not anything that we're worried about.
All right. Thanks. Any other questions on that topic? Any thoughts on that? Okay. A lot of people here in the U.S. That I talk to, when we talk to them about moving into Europe or promoting products in Europe or promoting offers in Europe, are always concerned about the fact that they're not bilingual. They feel concerned that all they know is English. They don't know German or Spanish or French or any of the other European languages. Do you consider that to be a barrier for affiliates to be successful in Europe, or is there a way around it? Jim?
I mean, it's like most things. I think, you know, if you're embarking on something as a long-term proposition, then clearly the better your localization is, the more successful you will be with it. I think you can have the barrier quite low to kind of like test the water, and I think if you look at it, there are certainly, in terms of like just if you wanted to do the translation side of things, that is there's so many translation companies out there, even things like Google Translator, Sistran have systems. It's it'll get you a pass of the way just to maybe do a bit of a test, just kind of test the market out.
Right.
And then obviously if you get some success with that, then certainly look to partner with people that specialize in that. And and again, it's part of a holistic thing. So you need to look at paid search, you need to look at organic search, you need to look at social networking, because they're all different in each of these countries. And there are, believe it or not, experts in most of these countries that are very good at that sort of thing. So, certainly the stuff we've done, we've never professed to be experts in Germany, France, Italy, so on, but we know people that are in those countries. So we can just pick up the phone and go, we need some help with this campaign. And
right. So, any thoughts on that, Matthew?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as an affiliate, I think what we try to do is make our recruitment strategy. We look out for the language skills in the recruitment strategy. Of course, if you work on your own, then you can use your network of friends. Have a look who is able to offer you, some free translation for a meal out or a contra deal. If you can't do that, look for joint ventures with people that might be located in the country, or friends or other experts in the niche that you're talking about. So I think language is more of a mental barrier rather than anything else. If you've got the technology behind a website, especially if it's data feed driven, language really isn't an issue, and it's something that can be overcome with very little cost. But I would say, do invest in translation. Probably wouldn't want to get a school leaver to do a translation for German or French or Spanish. Invest in translation and make sure you execute it correctly.
Right. James, what do you think about the bilingual issue, the language issue?
I mean, I think that, to be honest, it's not really a language barrier, it's more the culture barrier.
Right.
I mean, I think Jim mentioned earlier on already that something like rent versus a mortgage. You could have everyone in the UK, or the majority of people are looking to get on the property ladder and buy property and have a mortgage, whereas other territories that's not the case. I mean, we've had lots of offers that have come from the US that we've gone out to our UK and our European networks, where there has just been some money invested in terms of the language, and some of those campaigns have worked really well, and the landing page look exactly the same, the prizes are pretty much, or whatever it might be, are exactly the same. Whereas we've had others where they've completely bombed because they haven't spent that time and they haven't done that research to actually invest to see do people in France want to get remortgages on their properties, and the answer is probably no. So I mean, I think that's the thing to look at, and I think again just use the different research tools that are available. Use things like LinkedIn to contact people in other territories and to make that initial research, and I think that can go a long way.
And forums. There's a lot of like affiliate forums where they've got like an exchange where people will like basically say, I can translate stuff, or I can do this, or I can do that.
Right.
So again, if you have like a successful, banner ads that are working particularly well for you, you may want to just kind of like take those and localize them to enable you to kind of approach companies that maybe you can do a media buy in, Germany or France or whatever.
Great. Yeah, thank you. You had a question?
Yeah, we're a merchant, and we sell fashion jewelry, and we've been selling it in the States, and then we started in Canada, and then obviously UK and Australia, just really opened it up. And so what we're finding that's interesting, because right now I think we sell to over 50 countries, we're finding people are just simply using Google Translator and doing searches, doing specific keywords, and then translating our site as necessary, and then placing orders. And then what we're also finding out from a customer service perspective is that they are also using Google Translator, and they're using it in their own language, and then they're also using a translation in English, which is obviously nothing's perfect, but they're already starting the dialogue in both languages using Google Translator. And so we kind of reciprocated, mirrored that behavior, and having customer service do that as well, but also telling customer service, look, it's especially helpful if anyone has taken another language, to make sure that you're using very simple grammatical sentences so that you have a higher success rate of communicating whatever it is to help that customer.
That's a good point.
So, I mean, that's obviously a zero-cost
It is, yeah.
on an international level, that people are just being very resourceful, and as long as you have a good selection and all these other incentives to buy, I mean, they will overcome these barriers. So it is very much so, I think, mental.
That is excellent. Did everybody hear that in the back? I'm not sure if people were able to hear it. I'll quickly paraphrase it, and perhaps if I misrepresent what you've just said, perhaps you could just step over to the microphone over there. What the lady was saying was that she's in the fashion jewelry business, and she's been using Google Translator to correspond with clients, and clients do that as well, use Google Translator to correspond with them. Please go ahead and add whatever you think is appropriate to what I've just said.
Yeah, so we've just been following our customers' lead. So, for example, someone from Paris who doesn't know how to speak English perfectly will basically enter that in Google Translator and start inserting that into the customer service email at our company. But we're also finding from a reference link that people really are coming from the Google Translator link because they're finding what they need from there. So, so that's all I wanted to say.
So people are being resourceful, and I think
and they don't expect perfect translation.
Right.
Everyone is very, I think they're very flexible. As
very
long as
forgiving.
Yeah, and as long as you can respond to them in a timely manner. Everyone knows that everyone's in a separate time zone.
Right.
But as long as everyone's replying on a regular basis, you still build that credibility. And they're very forgiving. No one ever says, that your grammar wasn't perfect, in
Right.
the correct tense. So it's just been interesting from a behavioral standpoint
That is
in
interesting.
e-commerce to see that that isn't a huge issue.
So that's a very encouraging note. Thank you for that. So essentially what I think we can gather from that is, while it might appear daunting that you don't have the capability or the facility with multiple languages, there is a way around that, and people are forgiving because they actually do want to do business. And for the resourceful customers as well as vendors and affiliates, there are ways out. Thank you for bringing that up. That's a very valuable note. Any comments from the audience on that? You had a question? Okay. So just moving on to other challenges with respect to running European campaigns or running European offers. Something that we've talked to a number of different people in terms of some of the benefits of expanding into Europe from an affiliate marketing standpoint. Could you gentlemen talk about some of the things like the benefits of running European campaigns? Are they cheaper ad costs, less competition, better conversions, more targeted traffic?
Yes.
Right, okay.
All of the above.
Yes, then. Okay. So how does that work exactly? Why is it that it's more targeted traffic? Is that because of the nature of the searches that people do, or is it the nature of the cultural interaction with search engines? What are your thoughts?
I think a lot of it comes down to this whole, because people use the internet different ways in different countries, you're not going to have a kind of like a one size fits all. So take, say, Italy. I mean, whenever we've run a campaign in Italy in the past on paid search, the ROI compared to, a comparable campaign in the UK will be like a third. Right. And everyone will go, oh, that means Italians don't buy. It's just like they do buy, but they just do buy things in a different way. They shop around a lot more. It involves a lot more searches. They're much more discerning in the way they actually kind of conduct their business. So, you might need to buy 1,000 visitors, whereas the same campaign to give you the same number of sales might be 300 in the UK. Yeah, so as long as you're kind of looking at the comparable costs,
right.
The traffic will be proportionately cheaper,
right.
and as long as you kind of like measure that up and look at those numbers, then you should be okay. Right,
Matthew, you're familiar with lots of different advertisers and affiliates through A4U and through your other businesses. Mm-hmm. Do you hear from them that it's somehow better in Europe, and what the reasons might be? Any specific anecdotal evidence that you'd like to add to what we've already heard?
Difficult one. Most of the people I know that would be doing in paid search activity. There's a few in this room actually at the back hiding away. But certainly what I've heard is that the CPA vary considerably, but I think just to reinforce really what Jim was saying is that buyer behavior is certainly very different in other territories. So it's very difficult to have one campaign in one country and then replicate that in another and expect the same ROI. So as an affiliate, I think you have to factor that in. And also, if it's not paid search, look at some of the other channels as well, so you can get the revenue that way.
Okay. James?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only other thing I would add to that is just saying, I mean, we saw the graph I showed earlier on, shows that, people in Europe, they are buying online, as much as people are in the States and other territories. I mean, I think that, the difference and the benefits there are in terms of, expanding to Europe is, in terms of the affiliate space, it is a smaller market. There's less networks, there probably are less programs, but there's still the same amount of people that are shopping online and taking up offers. So I think there's a potential there to really expand your business. And we've already seen that personally the growth in terms of year on year when you look at the ad spends from the IAB and so on and so forth. Europe is where there are massive increases in the amount people are spending online. And the amount advertisers are spending online. So that will continue to increase, and now is probably the right time to get in there while the market is still relatively small compared to what it is out here.
Right.
I think the other thing to kind of point out is that certainly in say the paid search space, each of the countries in Europe have their own sort of like dedicated specialist teams of people based in Dublin. These are absolute natives of the country which market they work in, and they're based in Dublin because that's where all the Google customer service is done. So, if you're looking for some help and advice and guidance on how to kind of like construct campaigns, keywords, that sort of thing, Google can help you a lot, immensely. And I know that Yahoo have got sort of similar people that will do the same sort of thing. So if you need some help with keyword research to kind of get things kick-started, then that might be a kind of good place to go to begin.
So when you say Google can be a huge help, how would someone do that? Would they go do that through their AdSense or AdWords account, or?
Again, I mean, it's kind of difficult. I mean, I used to run a PPC agency, so we had the access to a dedicated team of people. Right. So we would just say, here's some keywords, and they would sanitize them and just make sure that they fitted from a translation perspective. Right. I mean, we'd taken them and we tried to, as best we could to start off with, translate them from maybe the English equivalents.
So would a simple approach like take a few keywords in English, use Google Translator to translate them into German, let's say, and try them out? Would that be a good idea? Or is that too simplistic? What do you think, Matthew?
I probably wouldn't myself, personally. I would probably, again, use the resource of the network and the account managers at the networks. They're probably going to be very eager to, obviously use due diligence to be careful, and maybe even consider NDA if necessary if you're that skeptical. But if you want to give them, an ability to look at your keywords to get the ball rolling in a particular country, then that's what they're there for. They're account managers. They want their clients to do well, and they want, at the end of the day, to earn more money for their revenue, for their network, and for you to invest more in their campaign going forward. So I'd utilize, if you don't have access to Google AdWords account manager, to use the affiliate network as well. And
do you think the affiliate network account managers in general are knowledgeable enough to provide that kind of advice?
I think if it's keyword activity, I think if you do paid search yourself, you know what would work roughly in one country. You just want the authority and the kind of the second opinion that you got it right.
Okay, sounds good. Yes.
I'm just interested in knowing a bit about the non-network affiliate programs, so all the ones that are out there in Europe or on their own platforms or whatever. Okay. How would I, as an affiliate, sort of hunt down these private affiliate programs in certain countries, let's say Germany, for example?
Okay, let me repeat that question. The question was, how would someone find non-network affiliate programs, standalone affiliate programs that are run by merchants themselves? How would a US-based affiliate be able to find them and work with them? Are there any tips towards that?
Certainly, like, I mean, and I know that obviously a lot of the private programs go through OPMs here in the States, and there are a few kind of OPMs in the UK that kind of do similar things.
For those that might not be familiar with the term, would you explain what OPM is?
I'm about to choke to death.
What was that again? Would you? Outsourced Program Manager, for those that might not be familiar with OPM. Okay, very good. And you had a question.
Yeah, actually, my name is Mustafa, I'm from Turkey. Basically, the question is, the merchants that you would see in the United States and the merchants you see in Europe, do they have any sort of characteristic differences? Just for an idea, I've been watching TV since I'm here, and I see like so much like direct marketing, offers, call to actions, free, blah, blah. But in Europe, those are not that, common. So I wanted to have a feeling about what you see works really in Europe and stuff that might actually not work here and vice versa.
Okay. Let me repeat the question. The question was, are there any significant differences between campaigns that work here in the US versus campaigns that work in Europe? The example was there are lots of diet and weight loss campaigns that run on TV over here. They seem to be very successful. They're not that common in Europe. And so are there any significant differences between the types of campaigns that work here and work over there? Would that be?
Yes, that's
okay.
I mean, I would probably say on that, I mean, we've seen, I mean, to give a classic example, we saw a diet program kind of came to us and they said, I've seen how well this does in the States, I've basically just ripped them off, copied exactly what they're doing, got our own product and we want to launch that with you. And I think that, when you looked at the page they had, it was very much a sales page that you see a lot out here. And it wouldn't have worked. So I mean, I would say that in different territories, and certainly in the UK and Spain and other areas that we've dealt with, we've seen that the standard kind of sales letter stroke approach that seems to be quite common out here doesn't tend to work. I think it's just the way that you talk to the user and the customer is different, and I think that you can get an insight of that by just looking at the different examples that there are over different territories. But there are definite differences, and don't come to areas of Europe with the sale letter type approach, because I think often you'll find that it doesn't work. However, I think that certainly from what we've seen, a couple of years ago or even 12 months ago, you wouldn't have seen many diet offers, and the ones that you did see would probably not work. But I think with the free trials and some of the stuff that has been going on, they're becoming a lot more common, and coming over from the States, more people are interested in doing that. So.
Great. Any other questions? Yeah.
I have a question about interaction marketing, contextual. I did I've been studying a lot of behavioral marketing overseas, on all countries. Did pretty well in Finland, actually. But how is that going over there? Because I've seen some of mine have really just bombed. I mean, totally. Contextual. Is that a problem overseas, or is that just?
So the question was, behavioral marketing works in some countries but doesn't work in others.
Yeah, I guess I've been watching the Times. They buy what they like to buy,
Right.
stuff like that. But what I don't get is that some I'll have 4,000 impressions, which if you're doing it in Portugal is cheap, but absolutely nothing.
No conversions.
I switched out offers, like 10 different offers just to test. Nothing. And I wonder if it's not showing up correctly, or they don't like interruption marketing, or that kind of stuff.
I think you probably need to do a deeper dive on some of the demographics of each country. If you look at it, I mean, like some of the countries in Europe for the last 10 years, like the kind of like population growth has slowed down quite rapidly. So what you're finding is that there are a lot more 0 to 15-year-olds now than maybe there were 10 years ago. So it may be that the internet users are of an age where they're not necessarily going to engage with what it is that you're looking to promote at the moment. That doesn't mean that they won't in the future. I think certainly with most things, you probably need to do a degree of trial and error. And I just think in terms of contextual advertising, it is cheap. I mean, it's very, very cheap to kind of do it over there.
If you can harness it,
yeah. If you can leverage it, of course.
Yeah, well, I'll check that out. I mean, I do the demographics on it, but maybe not deep enough.
Right. Good question. You had a question there?
Yeah, especially in light of the last couple of weeks with MasterCard, the evil continuity program, we tend to see them as, I just know personally, last day or two, I've lost a lot of, especially in
The one thing I would say is that...
could everybody hear the question? No? Okay. Let me repeat the question. The question was, with the recent problems with MasterCard and Visa cracking down on continuity programs in the United States, actually worldwide, there's been a significant number of people that have lost a lot of business, and the gentleman here was referring to the fact that some of his offers in France had been shut down, and so the question was, are we seeing that similar type of issue with other merchant account holders and so on? And I have a response to that, but go ahead, Jim.
I was just going to say, the thing that I'm drawing comfort from is it's not people aren't using the internet anymore. It's not like people don't have the ailments or problems that these products were kind of like doing anymore. I just think it's their tolerance of the way in which they've been sold has changed. And it's like, rather than people doing self-regulation, it's like the people that process things are going, like, enough's enough. So I think what will probably happen is they'll just need to change the business model, right, and just kind of come back with something that does kind of meet the requirements.
Well, the other thing that... Sure.
You were mentioning that free trials have become more and more popular. That seems like it's going against each other, where you're saying the business model can change very well, but at the same time, free trials seem to be making some inroads. Is there, is there a direction there that, or what do you see the model going towards?
Well, I think, again, you've got to look at it from the point of view of...
Let me repeat the question, if I may.
Yeah.
The question was, free trials were mentioned as something that is increasing in popularity. That seems to be going against this notion of stricter MasterCard and Visa regulations with respect to continuity programs. What's the situation, please?
I think when all's said and done, a free trial is not a free trial. It's a forced continuity. That's the issue that exists. It's not that, if it's a genuine free trial, and people can keep the product and there's no money to pay and whatever, then I'm sure that those programs will find a way to kind of exist in the marketplace. Yeah. It's just whether the advertisers have got the stomach to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that we saw is that because the banks were getting a bit kind of funny with those types of free trials with some of the clients and the merchant side of the banking, and I think what they did is they just changed the communication, they changed the disclosure so that the customers are completely aware, that they are going to get charged after this amount of days. And I think that's certainly something that we've seen, is that it's a lot more communicated, whereas previously there might have been loads of customers moaning about it on various different forums, etc. But now what they're seeing is they're a lot more open, and they take phone calls rather than just ignore emails and so on and so forth. And they've just had to become a lot more focused on making sure the customers aren't tricked into it, but are understanding what they're signing up to.
I think the chap from Turkey was talking about like the TV and how all that stuff. I mean, I've been watching TV over here, and bearing in mind that all this stuff is supposed to be clamped down upon, they were basically talking about it. I think it was continued receipt of product or something like that, and it's still being advertised on TV, and effectively that.
It's a complete double standard.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Well, there's one other thing. I mean, we're almost at 1 minute to the end of our session, but I'll just mention one thing. From what we've observed, the people that seem to be having problems with MasterCard and Visa are the relatively smaller merchant account holders, where even small amounts of refunds and chargebacks impact their merchant account status very significantly. That's one of the advantages, if you'll forgive a commercial message for 1 second, that's one of the advantages of ClickBank, in that we have a large number of vendors. We process 27,000 transactions a day, and as a result, continuity programs, forced continuity programs are very much a part of our business. So we can certainly take that up as a fallback option for those people that want to have that. Thank you very much. We've reached the end of our session. If you have any other questions, the panelists will be available after the session for you to chat with. Thank you once again.